and I'll edit it out. Okay.
That's what I usually do with Owl. I just let it run.
Yeah. Okay. So we don't get. Okay, I'm going back to my meeting.
Thank you. You're Sam.
Oh,
So,
yeah, just make sure he can be co-host.
Oops. Yep.
Yeah.
Sam is co-host. Boom.
There's about 30 people signed up.
oh, wow, cool.
That's good.
Names you recognize mostly, or what do you think?
Yeah, like Lindsay McMillan and maybe Emily Field, partners, bunch of Cindy
Awesome.
Fish coming on. Okay, I'm gonna jump off and you're all set. Just
Awesome. Thanks, Hillary.
this is
Appreciate it.
separate.
How's it going, Sam?
Good. How are you, Dave? I'm just going to.
Just share
I
your
want to test out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting it to the presentation mode. So what
looks good. Looks good to me.
you can see the full screen there.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So I can just see my timer and cool. And just lost it probably.
I see you. Yeah, it's back again.
All right, I'll be back momentarily.
Sam, you want to give it a few minutes after 11, get some more people?
Yeah, I think so. I think if there's 30 registered, we'll wait for a couple minutes. All right, I think we can get going here. We'll wait. We'll see if some more people show up. Yeah, welcome everybody. Good to see many familiar names in the participants list. A couple of new folks that we don't recognize or I don't recognize as well. So awesome to see. My name is Sam Beck Anderson. I am the Aquatic Invasive Species Program Manager at the Finger Lakes Institute. The Finger Lakes PRISM, under the Finger Lakes PRISM program at Hobart and William Smith Colleges in Geneva, New York. I'm joined today by Dave Carr, who will be helping me sort of manage the chat, as well as a couple other things as we go through. So thank you, Dave. And I guess I'm just going to kind of get going here. This is part of our, I think, kind of our spring, late winter webinar series that we've been running through the Finger Lakes PRISM with some good success. And I'm happy to be here talking about the Finger Lakes Institute's Watercraft Steward program and just Watercraft Stewards in the Finger Lakes region in general. I'm sort of taking a historical look at this program and other programs like it throughout the Finger Lakes region, progress, successes, trials over the years. And I hope you enjoy. I'd like to please feel free to chat in the box. And Dave, you can just kind of let me know when things come up. It's a small enough group, I think, that we can just sort of have a conversation if that's what people are into this morning, but if not, feel free to hold your questions until the end, of course. Just wanted to shout out Charlie Reek, our Watercraft Steward program coordinator, who helped me with a lot of putting the information together for some of these slides, and did a great job. So just going to jump into it here. First, we have sort of a program background of where we're at, and kind of just to provide some context to the story we're going to tell today. So the Finger Lakes Institute is a non-for-profit organization housed at the Hobart and William Smith colleges. It is a non-degree department of the colleges. It is a really good example of an interdisciplinary department that combines everything from environmental studies to physics to geology, hydrology, everything in between. The main goal and sort of focus of the Finger Lakes Institute is promote environmental research and education about the Finger Lakes and and its surrounding environments. Focuses a lot on regional partners and state and local government offices, and fostering environmentally sound development practices throughout the region and disseminating knowledge to the public. So programs held by the Finger Lakes Institute vary greatly. As we have our Finger Lakes, the Watercraft Steward program, which focuses on education, outreach, and invasive species, but we also have a number of other research-based projects. We host a number of research students from the colleges each summer, conducting their own independent research, and also have a number of ongoing research projects ranging from harmful algal blooms to mercury bioaccumulation in lake fish. We've, over the years, thinking historically, as this kind of story we're going to be telling does, we've had sustainable development, farm and food system programs at the Finger Lakes Institute, and many, many more. Generally, it all comes back to the Finger Lakes themselves and kind of the communities that surround them. So it's really a good program and department that connects a lot of people, a lot of information, and really achieves a lot. Within the Finger Lakes Institute, it houses the Finger Lakes Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, aka the Finger Lakes PRISM. The Finger Lakes PRISM is one of 8 regional partnerships in New York State. This is a DEC-funded program that operates throughout the state. It's just that, it's the partnership. So it's focusing on partnerships within these regions, and kind of connecting people and connecting resources, leveraging limited resources to really come together and attack the problem and topic of invasive species at a region-wide level. So we are, I believe, 17 or 18 counties. We are, I believe, the largest by land mass of all of the PRISMs and number of counties. So a lot of sort of things kind of tie into that complication. And ultimately, it's a lot of area to manage, but we get by with our great partnerships throughout the region and across our Finger Lakes landscape. It's a highly visible program that builds community awareness and participation through those partnerships. Funding for this is through the EPF, the Environmental Protection Fund, administered by the DEC to host organizations. And of course, you can see here the Finger Lakes Prism here, and the Finger Lakes Institute is at the north end of Seneca Lake. Here is the largest of the lakes, largest of the Finger Lakes, and one of the deepest water bodies, if not the deepest, in the entire state. So it's right on the shores of Seneca Lake, and is a really great location, and centrally located to aid in these partnerships. So just again, kind of zooming in and in and in here, kind of figuring out what we're talking about here. What are watercraft stewards? Many of you do know what watercraft stewards are, but for anybody that doesn't, the Finger Lakes Institute positions watercraft stewards at high priority boat, public and private boat launches throughout the Finger Lakes region. This is sort of the elevator pitch that I use for, prospective stewards or for programs that we're trying to work with. I sort of look at the roles and functions of the stewards in three different ways. So the first, probably most obvious role and function of a steward is the inspection of watercraft for aquatic invasive species. So a steward is located at a launch, a boater approaches the launch trying to use the water body, and the steward is tasked with inspecting that boat. So they're sort of the first or last line of defense against an invasion of an invasive species, sort of depending on which way that the watercraft is either entering or leaving a water body. And again, it's really the most obvious, sort of most visible role of the steward. Potentially more important, however less visible, is the outreach and education that stewards provide during those inspections to boaters, using their boat launch. This is a really important tool. This is one of the things that kind of draws attention to these programs, gives these programs teeth, and sort of garners support for these programs, is the education and outreach aspect of things. So it's really a sustainable approach to sort of preventing invasive species invasions. So we'll talk about it a little bit in the next slide, but basically, we want to sort of teach people how to prevent the spread of invasive species from happening without us being there. So that's really where that education and outreach comes in handy. We talk about clean, drain, and dry. We share information about invasive species in the region and in, even down to the specific lake, and talk about what people can do to help this cause. Finally, stewards collect a massive amount of data on everything from time of day to watercraft type, and many more. So we use this to sort of inform, manage decisions, and evaluate our program efficiency and efficacy on a number of levels. And we'll talk a little bit more about data later, but this is these are all really big parts, different parts of sort of what a watercraft steward does. So going back to the role of watercraft steward programs and where it sort of fits into the what many people might already know, the invasive species invasion curve. So where it really fits into invasive species management as these sort of educator, inspector positions. So the invasive species curve depicts the three typical phases, of AIS invasion as the invasion progresses over time. The invasion curve depicts the feasibility of eradicating an invasive plant and the efficacy and sort of efficiency that you can take on different management techniques throughout these three different phases of infestation. So sort of at the green down here is, at this very, 0 point, this is no invasive species, no time has passed. As you go through, you get towards more and more time has passed, the area infested increases, and the species becomes more and more established in an environment. As you go up, the eradication becomes less feasible, prevention becomes less feasible, ultimately becoming to a point where eradication is unlikely and impossible at the top, where people really start to focus on just sort of preserving their own materials. Things like removing zebra mussels from a water intake is a really good example of this really high level infestation of an invasive species, and how it sort of manifests itself in the choice of management techniques that people use. So where do watercraft stewards fit into this? They fit in very early. You know, there is some overlap, of course. Not all plants that we're looking for fall into this early category, but that's really where the watercraft steward becomes more and most valuable, is sort of in this state where we start to tell people about it and start to tell people about invasive species, and we're really focusing on prevention of new invasions. So stewards aren't really out there to be eradicating things or, you know, controlling an existing large population. It's more so to focus on prevention, containment, and detection. So that's really where the stewards fit in. So just running through a few case studies here. Hydrilla is one of the really big hot button invasive species here in the Finger Lakes. It was found initially in the early 2010s in the Cayuga Inlet down in Ithaca, Cayuga Lake Inlet down in Ithaca. That's this county, I believe here. Actually, this is Tompkins County in the south end. At the south end of the Cayuga Lake in the inlet. Hydrilla is a highly invasive aquatic plant from Asia, one of the most difficult to control. There's states down south, Pennsylvania, Florida, that spend millions and millions of dollars on controlling this plant. Unfortunately, we did find this plant and it launched a huge, you know, response in Ithaca and around the Cayuga Lake community. This plant grows in dense mats, shading out and displacing native plants, interferes with waterfowl feeding areas and fish spawning sites, disrupts water flow in reservoirs. The list kind of goes on. Really sort of basic, you know, impediments that are provided by any invasive plant are more or less applicable to hydrilla. The thing about hydrilla is that it can grow so fast. In some of the southern states, I believe some of the phenotypes of hydrilla can grow up to a foot a day. And just really take over and choke out a location. Some of the photos from Cayuga Lake Inlet, you know, from the original infestations, and some of the more recent ones too, are really amazing. So in around 2016, after sort of the populations in Cayuga Lake and the inlet were thought to be eradicated, these started popping up around the lake and really sort of tipped off a really good response, or an intense response anyways, from our steward program to cover Cayuga Lake launches to really try to contain that. So that was a really good use of that. And throughout it sort of created a rippling effect throughout steward programs in the region as well as across the state. People know about the hydrilla in Cayuga Lake all over the state. So it's something that really comes in handy, you know, these types of programs in sort of building that sort of rhetoric here. Another case study, Starry Stonewort. While it's been in sort of our general region for decades, Starry Stonewort is becoming more and more prevalent sort of on our radar of sort of prevention and containment in the past years, just because of the way that it's spreading amongst different Finger Lakes. So this is a freshwater green algae, macroalgae, grows densely in formed surface mats. Again, can really interfere with boating and other recreational activities, but also affects native plant habitats and animal habitats and water quality and all kinds of other stuff. So this is another plant, a really good, and this plant specifically, again, is known by a lot, you know, all of our stewards in the region, our program and otherwise, just because of how pervasive it is. And it's point in that invasion curve where it's not everywhere. It's not a zebra mussel. It's not totally far gone. You know, we can still sort of contain this and try to stop it from entering other water bodies. So really starting to get into sort of talking about the program, where it's at, sort of providing a basis for, you know, what it does, you know, currently. You know, I think we can start in this, you know, conversation of the evolution of the Watercraft Steward program for us, the Finger Lakes Invasive Species, Finger Lakes Institute and Watercraft Steward program. So watercraft inspection programs have existed in New York since around 2000 in the Adirondack region. That's at Upper St. Regis Lake and St. Regis Mountain through the Paul Smith College and Adirondack Watershed Institute. That program is still the biggest of all the Steward programs in the state, and continues. It's still located at the Paul Smith College at the Adirondack Watershed Institute. It's a great program. I suggest if you're interested in this, look it up. They do amazing things. They have over 100 stewards. They're at over 100 sites. It's really quite remarkable what they're able to achieve up there. And they, continue to be sort of an authority on these programs to this day, and influencing the way that statewide programs are run, influencing how people are trained. They help with trainings, all kinds of great stuff. The FLI Steward program began in 2012 with funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, administered by FL-PRISM. Similar contracts actually to that remain a funding source for the Watercraft Steward program today, partial funding source. This was an early program put together by our current director, Dr. Lisa Kleckner. We are one of the older programs in the state. I may be the second oldest after AWI, I believe. Since 2012, the Finger Lakes Watercraft Steward program has undergone major changes almost every year. So a ton has changed. We'll get into it kind of here coming up. Trying to get a slide number count. So really, let's start with kind of talking about how things have changed. We'll talk about kind of the story historically in other ways as well, but let's start with sort of how things changed kind of year to year. So this timeline generally represents some major changes to our program over time, or to sort of programs in general and sort of the development of the program over time. So 2012 began with the inception of the program. Back then, we used paper data, paper surveys to record data collected on voter demographics and other information. And it was a great program. There were many fewer people at that time, quite a bit fewer launches, and a totally different landscape that we were working in at the time. 2013, relatively uneventful. Moving forward to 2014, some funding gaps led to an abbreviated program funded by Cayuga County. This resulted in a significant decrease in overall program output, but really this sort of year, brought to light, how important partnerships are in this program and programs like this. Cayuga County was able to step in and provide funding, and the FLI was able to sort of partner with them to get the stewards trained, organized, managed, and collecting data and getting out there and doing what is important. In 2016, multiple programs, including FLI led by the DEC, recognized there was still a gap in statewide participation and analyses. Unfortunately, this gap to a degree still remains. There's been a lot of improvements, which we'll talk about based on that, but this was sort of a turning point. This was also my first summer running this program. This is when the state began development of the WISPA app, which again, we'll talk about a little bit later. At this point, we were just running, it was just me. I was just running the entire program. I think we had about 15 stewards at the time, at a similar number of launches, maybe about 18 launches. 2017 was the addition of a number of things. So this was my first year as a full-time employee for the FLI, and the first time that the Steward program at the FLI was able to have a full-time dedicated year-round manager for the program. So they were able to transfer kind of work that required more time over the summer, and a lot of planning that was involved with that really increased the capacity for the program as a whole. So this is when Steward program coordinators, regional coordinators were introduced. This is when data managers were introduced, which a version of that remains. The Steward program coordinator positions remain, but this was their first year. And again, my position was added there. Sort of behind the scenes at the state level, the WISPA pilot had begun with some success. We opted to not really dip our toes in until the following year in 2018. We transitioned to a more a open source data collection using tablets called ODK Collect. Later in the season, we transitioned to the WISPA survey developed by NYNHP and NISDEC, which was at its full rollout at that point, which is a really big step for us. In 2019, full integration into the PRISM contracts across the state continued. This is when the Steward program was fully integrated into the PRISM as I think one of the first years of that current contract, where the DEC basically required, the PRISM contract required that Steward programs be involved and included in PRISM contracts. So this was a pretty big step in terms of organization and funding and just general kind of transparency and accessibility to program information between this program and other programs, and vice versa. This year in 2020, the FLI recorded its greatest number of watercraft inspected, people contacted, and AIS intercepted during a single field season. So it was a hugely successful season, despite, this says COVID-20. This is not a premonition. This is just a typo here. This is COVID-19 was a really big part, unfortunately, of our season this year, which we'll talk about quite a bit. Through all of this, methodology has changed. We'll get into a little bit more, but this is really a good look at sort of the way that this program did evolve, between 2012 and 2020. Another really good way to look at sort of the way that this program has evolved is looking at the year-over-year comparison of sites. So you can see that, just between 2012 and 2013, we've added some sites. We've transferred sites here up on Lake Ontario. Canisius Lake was changed. This was the year in 2014, so it was mostly focused in Cayuga and Tompkins County. 2015 went a little bit more back to normal, still just abbreviated, a little bit different look overall from the earlier years. 2016, we added a couple of sites. I'm trying to remember specifically. We could go into this for hours, but this is just a really good way to look at this. 2017, expanding over to Canisius Lake and down south in Watkins Glen. Now we're going back up to the Rochester area, still in Canisius, and sort of filling in some of these gaps and looking at these trends change here. Further coverage in Rochester on Lake Ontario, moving away from Canisius Lake. Like I said, we could go into this. This is 2020. This is sort of the widest range that we've had since we've expanded into Broome County. On Dorchester Park as a sort of scouting expedition. But the point here that I'm trying to make is that things change. We're constantly trying to focus on, where should we be? What launches are the most important, most efficient, most effective? And we use data and a number of other things, anecdotal information, institutional information, and knowledge to sort of guide those choices. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. Site selection evolution range. So how do we get to that, evolving landscape of sites that we just looked at? So the FLI uses data collected by our stewards to inform management decisions, as we said. So this is a really good way to maximize prevention, early detection, rapid response, outreach, and education. So things that we consider when looking at this, I'll come back to data. We look at sort of proportion of hours worked to number of surveys complete, among other things kind of related to that. So really, like, how busy is a launch? Are we seeing on average 10 people a day, or are we seeing 100 plus people a day? At that point, if we're looking at new sites and trying to reach the most amount of people, that becomes a really important category. So other things we consider are new launches and new audiences. So sites that we've never covered before that might have been sort of, for whatever reason, we've been unable to cover it because of where it's located, or because we didn't have the capacity to cover it based on our hiring capacity, things like that. Those are all other really important things to consider. From year to year, we say, just for example, this past year, I think in 2019, the DEC completed construction on a really nice updated launch in Mudlock, which is near on the north end of Cayuga Lake. And we really wanted to see what that was like. What kind of response do you get from the public in terms of traffic at a site like this, which isn't typically sort of really on our radar, but we wanted to be there. So, there's another site, Atisco Lake, recently had a finished DEC site last summer that we are going to be making sort of a main launch for our sort of Eastern Finger Lakes region and Atisco Lake specifically. So why these new launches? Why is that important? We have to consider that some of these launches have people that operate there that only operate there, or at least a number of people that we might not have come in contact with before. That just increases our capacity to reach more people, to have these meaningful interactions, talking about invasive species and prevention, clean, drain, and dry, things like that, to a whole new audience. So that's a really important aspect of things as well. We also consider high priority invasive species, so things like Hydrilla, Starry Stonewort. We're going to focus our efforts when possible on kind of preventing things and providing close proximity coverage to populations that we know of. For example, Hydrilla in Aurora on Cayuga Lake. Ever since that, we've had almost daily coverage at the Long Point State Park, right just south of that population. We haven't, and that's we've had just a great example of the response to, and shows just sort of the flexibility that we can show kind of as a program. The Steward experience has also changed quite a bit. Of course, data collection has changed drastically from writing things down on paper, transferring it to an Excel, sending it to us, and then us having to check that base. It's changed drastically. So that kind of aspect is very clear. SOPs, education and outreach materials, are constantly changing. The DEC provides new materials pretty much every year. We provide our own materials. We're constantly developing through the PRISM and through our institution. We're developing new outreach materials, lake fact sheets. We've put together a invasive species field guide in the past, which turned out really nicely, that we use for our stewards. We give that to stewards, have them give them out. So things like that have changed drastically. Our training has changed. Our training process has changed significantly to include more hands-on. We've gone back and forth with more hands-on, less hands-on, and I think we're really, nailing and sort of zooming in on what is most important for training stewards. We also have increased the amount that we do continual training. I think we talk about that a little bit, sort of biweekly meetings in the future, but it's just been a big aspect for this. Of course, last year we were training via Zoom, so we're constantly changing, constantly adapting to kind of the current climate and what we're working with regionally and nationwide too. So job descriptions and duties have changed slightly over the years to include things like additional surveys that we're sort of giving out, additional projects that we kind of work with stewards to take part in that are also happening at the Finger Lakes Institute. We're also adding things like the way that we're focusing on certain topics. We've added things like sexual harassment trainings, sort of conflict management trainings, training specifically talking about the regulations. We've talked to OEC officer or DEC officers, things like that, and just really tried to elevate the way that we train stewards each year to just give them a better experience and really try to focus on our product of that inspection process and the outreach that we provide. Management has changed drastically. I sort of alluded to that earlier. So coordinators, lead stewards have been added. So I think last year was the first year we had lead stewards, which is a new position that's sort of a steward peer manager kind of position that we will be tweaking, but it was a great addition last year to sort of increase our capacity for providing support to stewards. Internal communication, clouds, things like sharing information, sharing outreach materials, sharing data and results, to sharing schedules, things like that, bulletins, things like that have changed. We've really strongly leaned into Zoom this past season for obvious reasons. again, which we'll talk about later. Scheduling has become more and more customized and flexible. We're really focusing on maximum coverage at highest impact launches. So that means that sometimes we have to move stuff around. We can't have our stewards just working a very rigid schedule of, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Like that's just not going to work. Or even, Friday to Monday. It's still, we need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to be flexible with where we'll be with how we schedule a steward so that we can reach the most amount of people and kind of have the biggest impact. So that's helped a lot as well. Gear and equipment has obviously changed. We've added to sort of the steward gear repertoire. We've added, worked on, higher quality chairs. We've provided invasive species sampling rakes. We've stepped up our game in terms of uniforms, trying to make our stewards look more professional and approachable. Changed the sort of swag, outreach, the handouts, promotional materials that we give out. And again, our E&O materials have changed quite a bit. Also kind of steward accountability, things like clock-in tools, how to know if the steward was there at 8 a.m. without being there for the 20 stewards that we have was, as you can imagine, a tough problem that we had. So we've developed tools using the sort of tech that we have, institutionally, and when we use it across the state to sort of make a custom tool to sort of ensure that stewards are held accountable. This is also kind of kicked back to where we land on management of those aspects as well. Rules and regulations have changed. So Part 576 is a DEC state regulation adopted in 2014, effective March 2015. I believe it's been renewed each year since its adoption, or every other year whenever it was going to be expiring. Basically, this part requires that reasonable precautions are taken to prevent the spread of AIS between watercraft uses. This basically translates to reasonable clean, drain, and dry techniques. So expecting that people are going to do that and requiring people to do that, or else they face a fine or warnings or an increasing level of fines if they keep getting caught on that. So basically the purpose of this regulation is to help control IF spreading and reducing new infestation. So basically they're just trying to sort of lay down the law to get people to, look for another reason to clean, drain, and dry, not just because we're telling you to or because it's saving the environment, but you kind of have to. So well, sort of the actual enforcement of this kind of is not exactly clear or hasn't been, strongly adopted by, local law enforcement. This still has acted as a valuable tool for stewards communicating the importance of clean, drain, and dry boaters. So it's got a little bit of teeth now. We can say, hey, if you don't, this was a big step for us. It was now that we can say, hey, if you don't clean and drain dry your boat, you might get pulled over driving down the road because you've got a bunch of hydrilla or whatever plant, hopefully not hydrilla, hanging off your boat. So that's really the basis of these rules and regulations that have sort of a big change sort of in these programs statewide. Training methods have changed. So each year we hold a really big training. They've now since moved mostly virtual, but it's a wide, 2-day full training for stewards that covers everything, like we mentioned, from inspection processes to invasive species identification skills and methods to how to deal with angry people and all kinds of different aspects that we have included and sort of catered to over the years. We've included, elevated mock boat inspections, and role playing has been a really important part in making people comfortable and stewards comfortable going into their first day. Bi-weekly meetings are something that we have sort of enacted. It was something that happened very early in the inception of the program, but those bi-weekly meetings have changed drastically. Initially, they were sort of to just sort of check in and collect timesheets, and they have essentially transformed into, a really important tool for continuing education for these young stewards. we have, recently enacted ID quizzes. So each time that a steward comes to one of these meetings, they're not just getting sort of lectured for an hour about, general things, things that people are doing wrong, whatever. We're trying to move away from that, every year as much as possible. That is still going to be a part of these meetings and our sort of continuing ed process, but we try to add as much value to these meetings as we can. So aquatic plant ID quizzes have become a mainstay. We've also been kind of leading reflection sessions where people are writing down what they're seeing about the program, what they want to get out of the program, what they are getting out of the program. These have all been really valuable tools in sort of developing things about our program that we didn't really think of on our own, looking to stewards to sort of provide some feedback. And this is, further kind of exemplified in our exit survey process has become a really important process for us in program development. So we've gotten a number of our ideas and sort of paths for data analysis, even, things like looking at time of day, things like that. We've gotten a lot of that from these exit surveys. Another really big change, we talked about in the timeline and kind of the data collection in steward programs across the state is the introduction of WISPA. So that is the Watercraft Inspection Steward Program application. It uses GIS sort of integrated survey technology on a tablet to collect to fill out a pre-created survey that is shared by stewards across the state. So it's big. It's developed by the DEC and the New York Natural Heritage Project. This is aimed at standardizing steward data collection and analysis across New York State, and it's been really successful in that. So 17 programs this past year, over 100 sites, almost 350,000 records collected in 2020 alone across the state. This is sort of what it looks like here in the ArcGIS sort of online dashboard. Other things this has helped with is with data accessibility. So now it makes it really easy for us to sort of take data from other programs that operate in our region and sort of use that to aid in our analysis and sort of program development as the years grow on. To me, one of the biggest impacts of this WISPA implementation has been that it's really brought groups together. So conversations and information exchange occurring at annual meetings focused on WISPA have been a really important way for groups, like-minded groups, similar groups across the state to provide, information, share ideas, kind of workshop different ideas, talk about things happening. We've been able to provide some combined trainings, not we, but the DEC has been able to provide combined trainings and things like that. There have also been a number of working groups that have stemmed off of these meetings. So things that involve, changing language to uniforms to data management and communication, all of these, subgroups have come from these meetings that have been really valuable to our program and I believe to other programs as well. So this is, kind of wrapping up sort of the change of the program. This is just a quick little table showing sort of how, the upward trend of a lot of, of both people contacted and total watercraft that we've looked at in throughout the year. So generally, things have gone up, barring this year in 2014. But this past year, we inspected over 40,000 boats and reached over 100,000 people. So that's a pretty big difference between that then and sort of this, 17 or so thousand boats inspected and around 40,000 people reached at the inception of the program. And we continue to grow, adding locations, trying to add stewards, trying to increase our capacity for the program. So on the same kind of the other side of the same coin, things changing over time with our program and programs across the state and within the region, there's a lot of things that have stayed the same. Important things. So there have been a lot of consistencies in management and kind of the priorities of this program. So the goals of this programs and roles of stewards have essentially stayed the same. So we're still focusing on inspections. We're still really focused on and education and outreach, and we're still really putting a big emphasis on data. So those kind of three major tenets have remained the same since I've been here and before I was here, you know, back to 2012, and really across the state as well. So really kind of zooming in on that, really that focus on education, you know, where, you know, we get the question a lot at boat launches, you know, where, oh, like, yeah, go ahead and clean the boat. This is, you know, a really good example of, you know, how things haven't really changed. You know, we're dealing with similar kind of issues like that, and sort of trying to communicate the fact that we are educating people. We're not just a cleaning service. We're not just there to pick the stuff off of your boat. You know, we're really focused on education and trying to get the message kind of communicated that, you know, these things are important, and, you know, giving agency to the public so that they can sort of take part in this process as well. Another focus has always been development of young conservation professionals. This is a really great program, a really good introductory position into the world of conservation. That's trained, it pays well, it gets you out in the field and can really get people excited. We've hired dozens and dozens and dozens of young conservation professionals. Many of them have gone on to land some really, you know, serious positions around the country. Other things that have changed the same: partnerships and relationships have always been important. Going back to that year in 2014, where we worked with Cayuga County to provide, you know, steward program coverage when we didn't have, you know, the funding lined up for us. So in addition to things like that, we have, you know, a number of different funding groups working with over, you know, funding groups are a big part of it. We've worked with a number of different groups across the state, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. Prioritization helped greatly by partners. So that sort of institutional knowledge that is, you know, provided by, you know, close connections through our PRISM and through, you know, long lasting partnerships with some of these lake associations, county organizations and governments and so on, have really been a driving force of these programs over the years. And just to sort of develop on that, you know, teamwork has been a huge part of this. So, you know, thinking about our program specifically, you know, we saw the map, there's a lot of overlapping stuff here, but again, partnerships have always been a big part of the Watercraft Steward program. We have a number of partner organizations that have come to us for training that operate their own programs around the region. So, you know, this is most of them. Most of the sites covered by other programs solely. So these are some sites, Keuka Lake, for example. The New York State Parks offers or operates a program in the region that covers a number of the prominent state parks in the Finger Lakes. Skaneateles Lake Association, Portland County Federation of Lakes. There's smaller programs out here, Cazenovia Lake, Lake Moraine, and Hamilton has programs. So there's all this patchwork of different programs that we've worked together in some way or the other, whether it's training, you know, distribution of different information, cooperating on smaller projects, and, you know, even down to just these meetings and working groups that have come from the WISPA sort of collective there has been really helpful. This is just a list of some of our funding programs here. I'm happy to elaborate on some of these if anybody has questions about them moving forward. So ultimately, yes, teamwork makes the dream work. This is, you know, something that has been important to the PRISM in general, the Finger Lakes Institute since its beginning, and, you know, definitely to the Watercraft Steward program in a big way. Excuse me. So with sort of that, you know, things have changed, things have stayed the same. A lot has happened since 2012. But what's happening now? And this is sort of a depressing look at sort of, it's like I said earlier, unfortunately, COVID played a huge role in this program. And it's a lot of aspects of this summer that are memorable do come from COVID and what happened with, what was happening with COVID at the time. So March 22nd, of course, you all remember we're coming up on this 1-year anniversary here. New York State closing all non-essential business and social distancing and began social distancing as part of New York on pause. So shortly thereafter, the Steward programs were actually deemed essential business in positions based on the belief that people will be turning to boating as a safe way to get outdoors in the summer while still social distancing, which is totally true. I don't know if anybody here experienced that in real time, whether you bought a boat or a kayak or something like that, or a camper, and it happened. It was a real thing, and it was exactly how it was predicted. And we were happy to sort of be, operating at full capacity when this stuff was going on. The Finger Lakes Steward program followed the up-to-date CDC and New York State safety guidelines to continue operations while maintaining steward safety and well-being as our highest priority, of course, and the safety of the public as well was really at our, a big part of this as well. So Watercraft Stewards during the COVID-19 pandemic continued. Social distancing, again, was a huge part of this, whether we're talking about, a water chestnut pull like we did here, where people are wearing masks and social distancing, to our training here. We have people spread out in a group at a nice park at the beginning of the season. Social distancing played a huge role in many aspects of managing this program this year. PPE was made part of the job description. So it wasn't just a suggestion. Stewards were required to and were audited on their use of PPE products, including masks, hand sanitizer, disinfectant, gloves, things like that, all provided by the DEC, thankfully. So that was, again, a really big part of this program. And other ways we sort of dealt with this was refraining from touching watercraft and asking boaters to remove any plant material when possible. This was weirdly sort of in line with other kind of goals and aspirations of the program, where we're really trying to get people more involved in the inspection process itself. So this was sort of an overlapping goal that we had that kind of worked in our favor. So that was a way, we built that into the training of the stewards, and kind of built all of this into training. Day one, we were even before day one, during interviews, things like that, we were sort of priming our stewards to be prepped for this. Stewards were also instructed and encouraged to remove themselves from any situation where they felt unsafe or comfortable. So if a guy was coughing and being sick, or there was eight kids jumping out of a car and running around the boat while I was, trying to do their inspection, stewards were encouraged to sort of remove themselves from those positions, as well as sort of practice that social distancing. We also were forced to do socially distanced bi-weekly meetings with reduced steward numbers, which was a really big undertaking. Surprisingly, we had to do 2 locations. 2 people had to be trained on how to deliver the quizzes and deliver the meetings, and we had to brief on the meetings. It was a whole thing, but we did get through it. Overall, things were much more normal than anticipated. No major problems associated with the pandemic affected the Watercraft Steward program in the Finger Lakes Institute. It was our busiest year to date, with some launches reporting up to 100% increase in daily traffic, which is unheard of. Mostly we really didn't have any people really complaining. We were anticipating a lot of people giving back, providing backlash to people wearing masks and people social distancing, and on the other end, people being afraid of our stewards and not wanting to come in contact with our stewards. We experienced a very, very insignificantly small amount of that happening. So all in all, it went pretty well, considering, the state of the nation at that point. And really it did, trying to create a positive out of everything. It brought up a lot of interesting kind of thoughts about where we are and how we're, it provided a lot of opportunity for reflection on the program and sort of how should this program look like? What do we need? What do we need out of just in the same way that, companies are moving towards, operating remotely now and probably won't go back to working in person. There were similar changes sort of that happened at our level, at the Steward level in our region very similarly. So that was, pretty interesting. Ultimately, we're going to be thinking about that this year as well, moving forward. So looking at the future, we're always trying to expand coverage at boat launches in underrepresented counties. So this year, we're going to be trying to provide full-time coverage in Wayne and Broome counties. So at SOTUS, on SOTUS Bay, up in Wayne County, and down in Broome County on the Whitney Point Reservoir in Dorchester Park, working on a couple of partnerships to make those positions possible. Really looking forward to that. Continued collaboration with New York State programs through the WISPA collaborative, group. The sort of community of program managers continues to be really valuable to what we're doing. Speaking back to some of the data groups I'm working with Kathy McGlynn of the New York State DEC on leading this data and communication working group that, right now we're focusing on standardizing definitions. So to provide a greater capacity for comparing launches, lakes, and programs. So trying to figure out, things like, how do you record how many people you've reached? How do you record how many boats you've actually inspected? Are you talking about total number of records? Are you talking about people that actually stopped and talked to you? So things like that, a lot of nuanced information that we work with is being looked at, really critically here, which is, I think, really valuable to existing programs to move forward, and ultimately for new programs as well, which I think is also really important. Also statewide, a really big movement right now for steward programs is focusing on behavior change and behavioral psychology elements that the steward program can implement. So things like taking a critical look at signage, language on signage, communication, whether it's a marketing campaign or the way we post things on Facebook, invasive species disposal boxes, other infrastructure like automatic boat washing or unmanned boat washing stations are all starting to pop up in our region, and we're continuing to sort of work towards figuring out what works best, where we can go next, and what we can do to really maximize and kind of just continue to develop our program to serve the FLI best. Specifically, we're looking right now at, from this presentation and talking with a couple of the other programs that, in that statewide or that region-wide slide with all the different programs. Right now, we're working on sort of collecting all of the data. So right now we have a really, robust data set for our own program and for a few small other programs, but we really want to bring more information in together sort of and collect it in a way to tell kind of a data-based version of sort of the story that we're talking about here, sort of the evolution of the steward programs in the region, and hope to build on that kind of in the future. So that's just something, directly on our sites, of course, for this season coming up in 2021. Hopefully we're going to be posting our positions soon. So keep an eye out for that. If you know of anybody looking for positions for the summer, please reach out. We will have a number of, new coordinator style positions, and as well as a large number of basic steward positions around the region as well. Getting closer to the warmer season, we're getting there, and I'm looking forward to this this summer for sure. So with that, I will just sort of open things up to questions. Yes. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That was really good. There's nobody's put any questions in, at least yet, in the chat box. But as you said early on, I think we've got a small enough group. If you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question, I think that wouldn't be too confusing.
Yes. Oksana.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so that was a great presentation. Thank you. I just wanted to ask specifically if you had made any changes in management or training based on the July 2020 state controller's audit of the Watershed Steward program.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Our big takeaway from that audit was really I'm happy to talk more about that specific audit if you ever have questions about it. It's a pretty nuanced, without going too into depth about my specific views about it. It's not as clear, I think, as it seems in terms of kind of what the biggest takeaway that we took from that audit is about signage. So the biggest thing that they said that was really sweeping across our region and across the state is that there's not enough signage related to invasive species in the region. This past fall, we actually launched in our region a full inventory of the most popular boat launches in the region and doing a full survey of the signage located at these sites and other AIS-based infrastructure in order to sort of gauge next steps for how to implement and sort of build up the signage presence in our region, focused on clean, drain, and dry specifically, invasive species specifically, but also looking at other, more like species-specific signage, like putting hydrilla signage on Cayuga Lake, and things like that. Other than that, there weren't many, major kind of responses to the audit. No.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Sam. This is Andy Sansone from Monroe County. I've got a couple thoughts for you.
Sure. Hi, Andy.
So we've not met, but we've been providing funding to the Soil Water District here for your program.
Yes.
It's through our FL-PRISM program. And so we realized a few years back that we were really not doing much with invasives in our water quality program. So we're trying to, beef that up. So we've got, funds set aside for the next couple of years for the Watercraft. And so I wanted to ask you, and maybe Hillary also, is do you have any other types, so we also have a big education program that goes on in the summer, social media, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, if you have some graphics or some content that we can, while the Watercraft stewards are working, we could, start putting out some of this messaging, or even, take some pictures of them in action. And I don't know if we need your approval to do that, or just check with them if it's okay, or just something to promote the program a little bit more, including signage. We can, if you could help us identify areas that might be good for signage, and, we can make the signs themselves if you give us the graphics. I think. So,
yeah, we actually have. Yeah, I mean, all of those things sound great. I think, just off the top of my head, yes, I think pretty much if you want to, I can't speak for any steward kind of getting candid photos of them taken, but I'm sure we can arrange that at any time. Basically, we do that sort of thing pretty frequently, and we are totally interested in collaborating on some sort of education and outreach programs as well. We've also provided billboards in the past as well. That could be a good option. We have a pretty good contact out of, I think, it's a Wildlife Forever is a program that does a lot of education and outreach, and a lot of they provide a lot of really good materials for communication, mass communication, specifically billboards, that I think would be a great use of funding like that, maybe in Monroe County specifically. We also have, like Hillary's mentioning in the chat here, have a Hydrilla marketing campaign for social media and video, which we
excellent.
have some. So yeah, we have some pre-made, plugs for that as well that I think.
So maybe as things, get closer this year, would I connect with you, Sam? Is that, would you be my contact for that?
Yeah, that you can absolutely connect, and I'll probably be connecting Hillary as well, but
Okay.
yes, reach out. I can just.
Well, I know I've known Hillary for a long time, so that's easy. So because, like I said, we're just trying to beef up that aspect of our water quality program here. We really haven't done much with it over the years. I know Hillary's come up and talked to our group a few times. Hi, Hillary. And so, if we can find some other ways to keep partnering, and I know, like I said, we've got funding set aside, and I don't know if you do surveys or assessments, or you have locations that might be, better locations for us to focus on, all that would be really helpful too.
Yeah, I think there's tons of opportunities for this. I like all of what you're saying, basically. So I think we should definitely maybe set up a time to chat about maybe specific action items and
Yeah,
kind of the best
great.
way forward. Maybe look at it kind of at as a summer, like look at from basically, late spring through summer and kind of plan a couple of different activities and sort of marketing sort of tasks that we can tackle and help each other out with. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we want to get you on Irondequoit Bay. I know a couple of years ago, the state parks was there, and then we had a couple of years where the water level was high and the launch is closed. And the launch it's under construction now, so it won't be open until June, but that's like a priority water body for us to have you on the bay. So
it is, yeah, I know. And we've sort of gone back and forth with that site as well. The fact that parks usually is there is sort of why we don't go there automatically. But yeah, I think parks will be back there this year.
Okay,
From
good.
the information that I have, they'll be back when it's live, I think, when it opens back up anyways. But yeah, I think, we're always looking at different areas within Monroe. I know I work with Kelly Emmerich at Soil and Water and kind of work every year to kind of say, all right, well, this is where we were last year. This is how it went. Let's think about where else we should maybe be. And maybe we can get somebody out doing some scouting or just asking around to see if people know kind of, boat launch use and traffic. So I think, yeah, all of this stuff sounds great. And we should definitely get together.
Yeah, let's connect and with, Kelly also, and we'll come up with maybe a little more interesting plan this year to do, more than just the Watercraft Steward, but, build in some education in addition to that,
Yeah, I like it. I think that's great.
All good, Hillary?
Yeah, that sounds great. We have posters, we have a whole marina outreach program, we have a ton of things. So we would love to be able to, insert some of the programs that we've been working on in Monroe County.
Well, that's the marina thing is because we're developing a website for Irondequoit Bay. That'll be kind of like all things Irondequoit Bay. And
Yeah.
a lot of the marinas have boat launches. And so, just signage or information that we can, and those folks, we meet with them monthly. We have a good relationship with them, working with them on various things. So that would be a good opportunity for us to connect with the private launches,
Yeah, I mean, Monroe County, Rochester is super important. I mean, with the invasive species there in, in the Erie Canal and Lake Ontario and the Genesee, it's so many people are coming from there to the Finger Lakes. It's super important to focus on that. So I am all for it.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh yes, this was
wanted sign. I mean, we paid a pretty good penny for these posters, and we have a ton of them. So, let Sam know if we can send some of these to you. They're obviously large, pretty large, but
yeah, we can figure a way to get them. Yeah, we can either meet you or whatever, we can work that out.
Yeah,
but
I'm local, so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, anything like that, you guys, we can put together a better plan this year, and I think that'd be great.
Sam, in the chat box, there's others. Michelle from Cuba and Roxanna both have interest in the same kind of thing. So
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if people want, so let me just make a note of that. So Roxy and Michelle. Yeah, absolutely.
Going to work out anything that's digital. We need to work out the best way to distribute that as well.
Yep.
Do we use Box, or Roxanna has access to some, but not a lot. So that's just not going to be worked out too. But
yeah, we have groups within our Facebook groups. We have plenty of ways that we can share it. Just getting the people directed to where it's located.
Yeah, and also if anybody has questions, if they're having trouble accessing stuff, please feel free. I put my email address in here. I'm always happy to point people in the right direction. I can even just send stuff or send you a link if we're having trouble getting you connected to the proper location. So always feel free to reach out. Anything aquatic related, feel free to reach out directly to me or Hillary.
Okay. Well, that's all I got. This has been great, guys. Really,
awesome.
Really informative.
Well, thanks for coming, Andy. Good to meet you. Look forward to working with you.
Nice to see you, Andy. I'll be
Okay,
at
we'll
the
see you, Hillary.
EMC meeting. I'll be at the
Keep up
EMC meeting next week.
Keep up
You'll
the
be
good
there.
work.
You too, buddy.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right. Well, I guess we will take the thumbs up from Roxana and silence from others that we're good to go. Thanks everybody for coming. Dave, thank you for proctoring.
No problem. Great job.
Yes. Thanks
Yep,
everybody.
good job,
Yeah,
Sam.
Sam.
Thanks.
Yeah. Have a good week.
Okay.
Bye.
How'd it go, Dave?
Sam did a great job.
Great. Awesome.
Great job. You know, really had, I think we had 16 total people at one point, but
Yeah.
that's not bad. You know.
You know, there's a way that you can have Zoom send a reminder, but I keep forgetting to do
Yeah, we
that.
talked about that with the Lake Association. I don't know how to do it yet either. But
I think I know how to do it, but it's just getting back, putting it on my to-do list to remember to to do that. That's the main thing.
Oh.
It's easy to do if you just remember.
anyway,
All right.
we'll be
Bye.
seeing you.